Just before we start the episode, here's a trailer for another podcast. If you like what you hear, go and check it out.
This is Dr. Mystery from the Cabinet of Dr. Mystery. Join me as we explore the horrors of the world. From true crime, unexplained disappearances, and alien abductions, to Satanism, cults, and the paranormal, our cabinet holds the mysteries of the universe. Visit us at notwhatwesay.com or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Jo.
And this is Crime Divers.
Hello everybody, welcome back.
Hi.
So thanks for joining us once again.
Yep, another episode for us to dive into.
Yeah.
So what's this one called today?
Funnily enough, when you said to dive into, it's called Lost at Sea.
Oh, so we are actually diving in.
Well, no. We're nobody's diving anywhere, but we are at sea.
All right, okay, fair enough.
Lost at Sea, it's called.
All right, so are we in a country then, or?
Well, yeah, the victim is American,
Right.
and they were on a Caribbean cruise.
Oh, right, okay. So we're not really in anywhere.
Well, yeah, because, you'll find out as we get in that...
Okay. Well, shall we just dive in?
Yeah, I think we...
Right, go for it.
So, sorry. Why does I always have to clear my throat? It's so annoying. So, Amy Lynn Bradley was born on the 12th of May, 1974, in Petersburg, Virginia, USA.
Okay.
Her parents were Ron and Iva, and she had a younger brother called Brad, and he was 2 years younger than her.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy was a good kid. She was focused. She was driven. What?
Her last name is Bradley, right?
Yeah.
And he's called Brad.
Bradley.
Yeah.
What? Oh, yeah. Sorry, Brad, because Brad's still alive.
Oh, no, I mean, I like the name Brad, but
Yeah.
and I like actually the name Bradley, but I'm just thinking,
That is strange. I never realised
if
that.
your surname is Bradley, why would you name him Brad?
And surely his name is Brad and not Bradley. Because, Brad's short for Bradley, isn't
Well,
it?
that's true, so I'm like,
Oh, I never even noticed.
people's
Oh.
choices.
What have you just dropped?
Phone.
Can you get it?
Yeah.
There might be spiders down there,
I was going
right?
to say that I didn't actually put my hand down there, but yeah.
Right.
Good.
So Amy was a good kid. She was focused and driven, and she received multiple college offers, but she chose the one closest to home. Amy and her brother Brad were really close, and it sounds like they had a really great upbringing and a close, loving family.
Mm-hmm.
By the time Amy was 23 in 1998, she had her own apartment. She was going to do a master's degree in sports psychology. So she was happy and she was excited for her future. And in early March 1998, Amy's parents... Laura's laughing because...
That was you that laughed. I didn't even laugh out loud. How can you blame me?
Well, I was just going to explain why we're laughing. Because usually, when we sit downstairs, we're I was sitting on the couch and Laura sits on my desk, my office chair. And so we're sitting sort of across from each other. But today, because of the noise out the front, we're sitting in my daughter's bedroom. So we're both on the bed, so we're kind of next to each other rather than facing each other. But when I'm trying to read from the laptop, Laura keeps looking at the screen and reading it. So I'm trying to move it away from her, so it's currently sitting on my shoulder.
We're so professional.
I know. But stop reading
I
it.
won't look anymore. I'll just, but if I gaze out the window, then I won't listen to you.
Right. I've changed position.
Okay.
So, in early March 1998, Amy's parents called her and they told her that her dad's employer was treating the family to a 7-day Caribbean cruise.
Who do you work for?
I know, we need to get a job with him. But Amy was reluctant to go with them. It seems that she wasn't too keen on the ocean, even though she was a swim team coach and she'd been swimming all her life. But then, the opportunity to spend time with her family, that was too good to miss. So she agreed to go, because I think it was kind of like a last sort of family holiday before they all kind of because Brad was 21, she was 23,
Right, yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, she thought it was a good opportunity to have one last sort of holiday before they went off and done their separate things.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the 21st of March 1998, the Bradleys boarded the 100,000-foot cruise liner called Rhapsody of the Seas, and they set off from Puerto Rico. So, on the morning of the 23rd of March, the ship dropped anchor in Aruba. The Bradleys spent the day exploring the island, and then they returned to the ship for dinner, followed by a calypso party on the upper deck. They danced and they had a few drinks, and like Brad won a limbo contest. So it sounds like they just had a really good time.
Yeah. Sounds
like fun. So about 1 a.m, the ship set off for Curacao, which is a tiny island off the coast of Venezuela.
Right.
So Amy's parents, Ivor and Ron, they decided to call it a night and they went off to bed. So Amy and Brad, they went to the ship's 24-hour dance club to hear a performance by the house band.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't sit together. They were like, Brad was dancing with girls and, you know, chatting girls up and stuff. And Amy, she was seen, after the band had played, Amy was seen dancing with the band's bass player. He was called Alistair Douglas. So Brad, he went back to their room because they were all sharing like a room or a cabin or whatever you call it. So he went back to the room about 4 a.m. and he just sat outside on the balcony. And then about 15 to 30 minutes later, Amy arrived back and she sat and she joined Brad on the balcony. So they just chatted for a while. Mm-hmm. And then Brad decided to go to bed. So Amy said she wasn't tired yet, so she was going to stay up for a bit longer. Mm-hmm. So at 5:30 a.m, as the ship arrived in Curacao, Ron woke up, her dad. Mm-hmm. So he could see the balcony from his bed and he could see that Amy was asleep on one of the loungers.
Right.
So he said that she looked comfortable, so he didn't bother going to get her up. He just left her there and he drifted off back to sleep. So he woke up maybe about 6 o'clock in the morning, about half an hour later, and when he looked outside, Amy was gone.
Right.
So Ron assumed that she must have woken up and went up onto the deck for maybe a coffee and a cigarette, or maybe she was like up taking photos. Mm-hmm. So obviously he wasn't
concerned.
Yeah, he wasn't too bothered, but he thought, oh, well, we'll go up and see where she is. So, but he couldn't find her. He started to feel a wee bit worried, so he took a walk around the ship looking for her. So he looked for about an hour and he couldn't find her, and so by now he was kind of starting to panic a bit. Mm-hmm. So he went back to the room and he woke up Ivor and told her that she had to get up and help him look for Amy. So see, this is what I would be panicking. Like, this is why I will not go on a cruise, because if you do go missing, where do you think the person is? I would think immediately they're in the water. Yeah.
They went overboard.
So it's one thing I would no.
I mean, I don't particularly like being on boats anyway, because obviously I've been on a big boat to a small boat, but I get a bit seasick on like small boats. So I know you probably don't feel it as much on a big boat, but I don't know how I would feel. But I've just never fancied like a cruise holiday. It's never been something that's interested me.
Well, see, I think cruises look really good.
Yeah, they do.
They look amazing. But I always think to myself, but what if something happens, you've got nowhere to go? Like, just say something goes up on fire. Like,
they might put out.
Well, yeah, I know, but like, I don't know, there's like a terrorist attack, like, you know, you've got nowhere to go, have you? You're just out in the sea.
You're not supposed to think of these things.
Yeah, well, I would, so.
Yeah, but no, I've just never fancied the cruise personally.
No, but.
I have heard they're quite good if you're into that.
So. Yeah, so that's why I'm kind of thinking maybe that's why he was starting to worry and panic so quickly, because, as you know, she's 23. Mm-hmm. So normally you probably wouldn't think too much of it, because you'd be like, well, she's an adult, like she's maybe just
exploring, or
or she could have met somebody and you don't know what she could be doing. So I think maybe because it was a cruise, maybe that's why.
Yeah.
So Ivor and Brad got up and he helped to look for her as well, but she was just like nowhere to be found.
Right.
So the ship, it is a massive ship, but obviously, so there's a lot of places to kind of cover. Mm-hmm. But the passengers on the ship, they were getting ready to spend the day on Curacao, but the Bradleys told the crew about Amy being missing, and they begged them not to let down the gangplank. Mm-hmm. So they wanted the ship searched thoroughly, like before anybody got off. Yeah. But the captain agreed to launch a search for Amy, but he refused to make an announcement to the other passengers or sail off the ship.
Right.
But there was like, I get it, like, because obviously as I said, she's 23 years old. She might just
have wandered off somewhere.
She could have went with some. She could be in somebody's room. Like she could have, found a guy. She could be away having a.
Yeah, but then I suppose if he's seen her at 5:30, and
it's
only been half an hour since he last saw her, so
I know, but like from the captain's point of view, he's running a cruise and he wants to keep his passengers happy, and they're all having a holiday. So, but there was about 3,000 people on that ship that could have helped look for Amy, like,
well, I was going to say,
or just be asked to say, like, can you keep an eye out for her, like,
seen her or...
But the captain refused to tell him, as he didn't want to upset his passengers. Right. But I was thinking, but why would your passengers be upset? Right, I would just put myself in that position. If I was on a cruise and there came an announcement just saying, 23-year-old has gone missing, could you keep an eye out for her, whatever it was, I'd be like, all right, okay, I'll keep an eye, and I would still go about my day because I wouldn't really think that much of it. I mean, it might, as horrible as that may sound, I don't think I'd be too concerned because, as I said, she's a grown woman.
And the thing is, though, it's like, you would like to think that if you were in that position where it was a member of your family that you'd gone missing, you would want everybody to be looking, so you would be,
of course,
you would be understanding. I mean, it's...
I bet the majority of passengers on that ship wouldn't have minded being told that. They would have been like, all right, okay, we'll keep an eye out.
Oh, I've always said, when somebody goes missing, the first sort of few hours or whatever,
that's the most crucial,
most crucial time. So if you've got 3,000 people, then surely somebody's got to have come across her potentially.
Well, yeah, of course. Like, and people, like, out of all these people, somebody could say, well, I saw her last night, or the last time I saw her was.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, that. So the passengers, they all got off the ship.
Right.
But the Bradleys stayed on the ship, and they searched the ship all day, and there was still no sign of Amy. At 5 p.m, they met with the captain, and he said that his search, because him and his crew had a security team, they'd said that their search had been unsuccessful as well. He said, quote, every nook and cranny has been searched, your daughter is not on the ship.
But then, like, if that's the case, fine, but then they've let all the passengers off the ship. I mean, if she, for any reason, she wanted to just go off, or she wanted to, whatever was going on, well, they've just let her off the ship anyway, so obviously she's not back on the ship. Or there's a chance she's not going to be back on the ship.
Oh. So the captain suggested that Amy could have fallen overboard, but the Bradleys were sceptical. They said she wouldn't go near the rail because, as I said before, she was kind of quite wary about the ocean.
Yeah.
So they didn't believe that she would have fallen over accidentally. And I'm thinking to myself, sure, I haven't been on a cruise, but surely it must be quite hard to fall over accidentally. Like, surely they must have like railings up or
like high enough to
so that you wouldn't just fall over accidentally. I mean, if you were climbing or something like that, then fair enough. But like, you're not just going to be standing there and a big wave comes and you fall overboard. Surely that's not going to happen.
Well, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't have thought so.
I wouldn't have thought so. But some of the ship's crew suggested that Amy may have jumped, obviously, to kill herself. But again, the Bradleys didn't believe that. Brad said that she was happy and excited about her future, and in his mind, Amy jumping was just not a possibility. I mean, obviously, you don't know what's going on in somebody else's mind. But
especially if she's scared of the ocean a bit and wary, then she's not going to do the one thing that she's scared
of. Yeah, I very much doubt it, and obviously they didn't believe that. So another crew member suggested that Amy may have got off the ship in Curaçao. So
which is why they shouldn't have let anybody off until they searched the ship.
Yeah. So he said the Bradleys should get off the ship and go and search the island.
Right.
So they didn't believe that Amy would have gone off the ship without them, which I think I'd be the same. I'd be like, no, we're on a holiday together. My daughter's not just going to go and wander off by herself.
Well, especially if she's never been to the country, the place that they're going. She's not just going to go away and...
Why would she? They're enjoying each other's company, and if she, for any reason she was going to go off by herself, surely she would tell them or leave a note or something.
Yeah,
like,
I would have thought so.
So they, as I said, they didn't believe that she would have got off, and they wanted to stay on the ship and keep searching. But the crew member had said, well, if you stay on the boat and it turns out she is on the island, we can't let you off. So assuming that once they'd set sail. Once they'd set sail, turns out she was on the island, there's no way for them to get off the boat.
Right.
So at 5:30 that evening, the Bradleys reluctantly got off the ship and thought, right, okay, we'll go and search for her. But in less than 4 hours, the ship would be setting off to its next destination, so they didn't have that much time to look for her.
Yeah. Oh my God, that must be like so scary, because if the boat actually leaves without her, and you've got no idea where she is.
Well, and this poor family, they were in a foreign country. They had no idea what to do. They tried contacting the embassy, but it was closed.
I feel like the ship's not really supporting them.
No, they're not. But as I said again, I think if it had been a child, I think it would have been a million times different.
That's what I mean, yes.
But because she's an adult, they're just thinking, no,
it's no big deal.
It's not a big deal.
I bet they regret that now, because clearly it was a big deal, otherwise we wouldn't be telling this story.
Exactly. So they reached out to the FBI, but it would be 24 hours before agents could get out to the island. So as the ship got ready for departure, the Bradleys made the decision to stay on the island and keep searching, because they'd searched the boat. The captain had said that we've searched every nook and cranny. She is not on this boat. So they were like, well, right, okay, well, she must be on the island then. So they got the stuff off the boat and they must have found a hotel to stay on the island.
Right.
But unfortunately, the next day, they received a phone call, must have been at the hotel, from the FBI. And it turned out that they'd said, I think maybe your decision to stay behind in Curacao might have been the wrong one.
Right.
Because the FBI had been in contact with the ship, and actually there hadn't been a thorough search. The people on the ship, the crew, they had searched the common areas and the restrooms. And that was it.
So how could they then say that they had? What a shame. They totally misled them.
That captain claimed that they'd every nook and cranny.
That's happened, then what's made them? Is it because it's the FBI that's asked them that they've decided to come?
Well, I think because the FBI has got in contact, they're like, oh shit, this is a big deal. So he's obviously went, well, no, actually, because there is a possibility that she could be here. So
that's awful.
Yeah, I know. So as I said, they thought, well, is Amy still on the ship then?
So they basically got no idea where she could be.
No, so the Bradleys and the FBI agents, they rushed to St. Thomas, which was the ship's next stop, so they could get back on the boat.
Right.
So I think they had to get a flight or whatever to St. Thomas. So this was 2 days after Amy had went missing. So the FBI did an extensive search of the ship, and they gave crew members a picture of Amy to ask passengers if they'd seen her. They should have done that before.
Well, they should have done that in the first place.
Yeah. So, and Amy's family, they just continued their own search. So Iva and Ron, they were walking down a hallway, and two sort of college-age girls came running up to them, and they were sort of quite frantic, saying, like, where have you been? We've been looking for you. And they'd explained that they'd got off the ship, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, well, we saw Amy with one of this band member.
Right.
So the girls claimed that at 5:45 a.m. they had seen Amy. So remember, her dad woke up at 5:30.
She was lying.
So and she was there. So at 5:45, only 15 minutes after her dad had seen her, they had seen Amy headed back to the all-night dance club with the bass player, Alistair Douglas. So that actually reminded Brad that morning that Amy had disappeared, when he was sort of running about looking for her, he'd bumped into Alistair. And Alistair had said to Brad, hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your sister. And at the time, the only people who knew about Amy's disappearance was the captain and his security team.
So that guy shouldn't have really...
So he shouldn't, but Brad hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Or he'd maybe thought he's maybe overheard it from somebody,
or got round or whatever. Yeah.
So he didn't think anything of it at the time, but now, alarm bells were ringing. So the Bradleys reported it to the FBI, and Alistair was brought in for questioning. They wanted to know how he knew about Amy's disappearance before it had been announced. But Alistair denied all knowledge and said, no, I had no idea. That didn't happen. I had no idea about her disappearance. So they gave him a polygraph test, and he was questioned again by the FBI, but there wasn't enough evidence. So the polygraph must have been inconclusive.
Right, okay.
So there wasn't enough evidence to detain him.
Right.
So according to the Bradleys, the mystery surrounding Amy's disappearance deepened further when investigators discovered that the ship's photo service... they come and take photos of everybody and then they try and sell them.
Yeah.
Well, they'd lost all the photos of Amy.
What?
From the night. Yeah, they'd lost the photos. So the photographer said that he had definitely printed the photos off.
Right.
And I think, you know how they display them, like on a wall or whatever, they display them.
Yeah.
But somebody must have taken them. And this was like the night before she went missing.
Right.
So, and still to this day, nobody knows what happened to those photos.
Oh, really? Right.
So...
I mean, they could have well just been chucked overboard. I mean, you're never going to find them once they're...
Yeah, but who took them?
Well, this is... Do we find out? Do we not find out?
No, that's what I'm saying. Nobody knows what happened with the photos.
Right.
But to me, it looks like somebody doesn't want...
Well, what were in the photos that would be incriminating?
Well, nothing. No, if she's went... if she's disappeared, wouldn't the people that were searching her for her want the most recent photo of her?
Mm.
If you don't have a photo of somebody, how can you expect people to help you find them?
True.
Like if I said to you, oh, this woman's went missing, she's got brown hair, blue eyes, she's 5 foot.
Could be
Yeah, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
But if I give you a photo, you could be like, oh yeah, I did see her. 1998.
Alright, so things like on the phones and that, we wouldn't have photos and that anyway. So yeah, right enough.
But they must have had a picture of her that they printed off at some point, because they were handing a photo around. So maybe they, I don't know how. Maybe they had it on their camera. The Bradleys maybe had it on their camera and got it printed off.
Or they could have easily, like a family member could have, like that was back at home, could have went and got them a photo from.
Well, yeah, I don't know how, but that was just a really weird thing.
Yeah, that's a bit random.
So because of that and the suspicious behaviour of Alistair Douglas, there were growing concerns that Amy's disappearance might be related to some sort of kidnapping conspiracy.
Right.
So now do you see, like, if she was kidnapped, the people who kidnapped her are now wanting the rest of, like...
How do you kidnap somebody on a boat? I mean...
I don't know.
Like, where do you intend to take them?
Well, despite searching the ship and interviewing several crew members, the FBI didn't have enough evidence to charge anyone with kidnapping.
Right.
So, on the 28th of March, it was the end of the cruise. So the Bradleys, they had to go home. They had to just get off the ship and catch a flight home. So once home, can you imagine that? Like, coming home without your daughter?
No, but even, like, imagining, like, the cruise just carrying on as normal. Like,
well, they have to, though, for all the other...
I know, but...
For the other 3,000 passengers, they have to.
That's true, but...
So once home, they launched a nationwide campaign to bring awareness to Amy's case. So they went on TV shows and they did interviews with as many people as they could, and they also put up a $200,000 reward to anyone with information leading to Amy's safe return.
Mm-hmm.
But despite all the media attention and the reward, 4 weeks passed with no new developments. So on the 21st of April, Brad and Ron decided to return to Curacao to search for Amy again. So they rented a car, handed out flyers all over the island. Within 24 hours they received a tip. A taxi driver recognised Amy from the flyer and told them that he saw her on the morning that she vanished. So according to this taxi driver, Amy approached his taxi just minutes after the ship docked. So he was obviously sitting in the taxi rank. Mm-hmm. So they obviously know when there's going to be a ship docking because they'll be looking for fares.
Yeah, of course.
So that's how he knew. It was just minutes after the ship docked on the island. He said that she seemed frantic and she ran up to his taxi and asked where the nearest telephone was, and then she ran off.
But that makes no sense.
How?
Well, why would she, so the boat docks, she runs off the boat. Who does she need to run to phone? I mean, surely if she's scared or anything, she'd be running back to where her parents are in the cabin.
Because she hasn't ran off the boat by herself. She's been forced off the boat.
Well,
so she's maybe managed to get away from them and ran to ask for a phone call.
Or run back to the bloody boat.
But if she's not going to run back towards the people that she's just ran away from.
Well, she could head and then run back there. But they should never have let anybody off the boat.
Well, yeah. But I can see why they did, though.
Well, yeah, but...
If somebody's only been missing for like an hour on a massive boat...
Yeah. Oh, no, you can't really...
And a grown adult, you can't shut down the boat and other people's holidays just for that.
True.
So, I mean, knowing what we know now, obviously it's like, that's what they should have done, but, they didn't know that.
No, that's true.
So, with the help of the local police, Ron and Brad searched the tiny island for any trace of Amy. 4 days into their search, Brad heard a familiar voice. He said that he heard Amy shouting for him, like calling his name. So the voice seemed to be coming from a passing van. So they followed it. But eventually they caught up with the van, but it turned out it was just a guy by himself. Like, there was nobody else in the van. So Brad said that they either followed the wrong van or maybe he just heard what he wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. So he maybe didn't hear Amy's voice. He could have done, but... Yeah. So we don't know.
Right.
So after nearly a week on the island, Ron and Brad decided to go home. But on their way home, they had a layover in Miami. And while they were in Miami, they got some news from Iva. The harbour master from Curacao had called the house and told Iva that they had found a body.
Right.
It was a female, she had brown hair, and he thought it was probably Amy.
Okay.
So the Bradleys had to wait 24 hours for the remains to be identified. Can you imagine that wait to find out if that's your daughter or not?
Mm-hmm. Turned
out the body wasn't Amy. It was a male.
Okay. Was that not distinguishable at the
Well,
time?
I have no idea. But
Okay.
the harbour master said it's female. She's got brown eyes. Brown eyes. Brown hair.
Yeah.
It's a male.
Why would a harbour master be phoning you? That you think that he would contact the police and then the police would
I
then
don't
phone
know.
you?
I don't know, but it wasn't Amy anyway.
Right.
So, in May 1999, which was 14 months after Amy's disappearance, there was a segment on a TV show about her case.
Mm-hmm.
So, a Canadian man called David Carmichael, he saw the show and he called the Bradleys with a lead. He said he had no interest in the money and he just wanted to let them know that he had seen Amy since her disappearance.
Right.
So, according to David, he was scuba diving in Curacao 5 months after Amy vanished.
Mm-hmm.
He and, I don't know who he was with, but they were washing their equipment. He had looked down the beach and he saw a girl walking with two men, like one on either side of her.
Right.
At first he paid no attention, but as they got closer, it was as if, I think the girl must have heard David talking and realised that he spoke English.
Right.
So she kind of picked up her pace and put some distance between her and the men. Mm-hmm. And she got close to David and she looked like she was just about to speak to him, but the two men caught up with her and pulled her into a cafe.
Right.
So David thought, it's a bit weird. So he actually went into the cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that the girl had a scar on her left shin, a Chinese symbol tattooed on her ankle, and a Tasmanian devil tattooed on her shoulder. And basically, he described Amy to a T.
Right. So that was her.
That was Amy.
Right.
So he told the Bradleys this.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bradleys contacted the local authorities and they searched the area, but there was no sign of Amy. So 3 months later, another man came forward with additional information that seemed to prove without a doubt that Amy had been kidnapped.
Right.
His name was Frank Jones. He was a private investigator who claimed that Amy was being held captive and that her captors specialised in one of the Caribbean's darkest secrets, human trafficking.
Right.
So Frank said that he believed that Amy had been forced into sexual slavery.
Mm-hmm.
He said he could bring Amy home, but he needed to get a team together and it would take time and it would cost a lot of money. So, of course, the Bradleys were willing to pay anything to get their daughter back, but they wanted proof first because, somebody coming along and asking for money.
Was he a scammer?
So they wanted proof that he knew where Amy was. So Frank sent them photos, and in those photos you could see her, the distinctive tattoos and that, so they gave him the go-ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So over the next year, Frank Jones and his team were staking out brothels and drug dens, ultimately concluding that Amy was still alive and was being held on the island.
Right.
So on the 22nd of September 1999, Frank told the Bradleys that he had gathered enough intel to successfully extract Amy. But to do so, he needed an additional $100,000. So Ron asked to borrow the money from his boss to pay Frank. And his boss wanted to help, but he wanted to make sure that it was all legit before he handed over the money. Sensible.
Mm-hmm.
So on the 1st of November 2000, he sent a security contractor, Tim Buckles, to Curacao to monitor Frank Jones and his team.
Mm-hmm.
But after just a few hours on the island, Tim contacted the Bradleys. Frank Jones was there, but he was drinking and he was living the high life on their money and doing nothing concerning Amy. Basically, Frank Jones was just a con artist. Mm-hmm. The photos that he had sent Bradleys weren't of Amy. He had saw her tattoos in the media and he got a tattooist to stencil them on to this girl. I don't know who the girl was that he was with, but so to make her look like Amy, mm-hmm. He had never sent a photo of her face, which they understood because they were like, well, if he's surveying her, it was kind of photos from the side, photos from behind, so making sure that he got the tattoos in. How?
That's awful.
That is horrendous. He had been given over $200,000 by the Bradleys, but it wasn't even just their money. The money had came from a donation fund that they'd set up to to find Amy. So in February 2002, Frank Jones was arrested in Virginia and he was charged with mail fraud. So he was sentenced to 5 years in prison and he was ordered to pay the money back to the Bradleys. So at least he got punished for it.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But how could you do that to somebody? That is
awful.
Disgusting.
It is.
That's sick.
That's low.
It is.
Lowest of the low.
To do that is just disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
So another lead came in after that. It was from a sailor who was stationed on Curacao. So he had gone into a brothel and a girl approached him that was working there and told him that her name was Amy Bradley and that she needed help.
Right.
He asked her what she needed help with, and because obviously he didn't know who she was, who Amy Bradley was. She said she needed help to get out. She couldn't get out. But then someone motioned at her to move away, so she had to sort of get away from him. Mm-hmm. And because the sailor had been on duty, he wasn't supposed to be in the brothel, so he waited more than 2 years to come forward.
Right.
Because obviously he would have got in trouble for that.
Right, okay, yeah.
And since then, the brothel had burned down, so there was no hope in going back there and trying to get any leads. So, another 4 years went by with no leads in the case, but finally, in September 2005, the Bradleys received a tip. An anonymous source sent them photos that had been found online. The women in the pictures looked just like Amy. So they were taken from an adult website based in the Caribbean, and the woman was being advertised as a female escort.
Right.
So the Bradleys got in touch with a forensics detective to compare the photos with photos of Amy. And he determined that the facial structure, hairline and her ears made the woman a perfect match for Amy.
Right.
He said he was so sure that he would bet his career that those photos were of Amy.
Right.
So investigators began tracing the IP address of the website that hosted the photos, but they had trouble pinpointing the exact location. But with this new information, Ron and I turned to the media again, hoping that someone would recognise Amy, who was now 31. That's awful, isn't it?
Maybe I'm thinking, well, why did they not just get somebody to pretend to want her services and then get her to find out where they needed to meet her and then get her that way? I mean, is that not?
I don't know.
Because that's what I would do, wouldn't it?
Well,
or
yeah.
I think about doing.
But I don't know. But there was nothing saying that, so I don't know. So in December 2005, the Bradleys got another tip. It was from a woman who lived in Ohio called Judy Mauer. So Judy and her husband had been on a cruise and the ship had docked at Barbados in Bridgetown and they'd went to do some shopping. They were in a department store and Judy went to the ladies' toilets. She went into a cubicle and sat down and then she heard the main door opening and she heard men's voices. One of the men shouted at someone, "The deal is at 11 o'clock. You better be ready to go and I'm watching you. You better cooperate. This is my deal. You better not mess it up." So the men left and Judy came out of the cubicle and she saw a woman who looked to be in her 30s standing by the sinks and she was shaking and looked like she was about to cry. So she obviously realised that's who the man had been shouting at.
Yeah.
So Judy asked if she was okay and where was she from. The woman said she was from Virginia. And Judy then asked her name and she said Amy. So... But then there was a banging on the door and men's voices, so Judy kind of panicked and she just left the toilets. But as she walked outside the door, she passed 4 men who were waiting right outside the door. So there was no chance that this Amy was going to get out without, getting past these men. And 9 months later, Judy was reading an article about missing people, and she saw the photos and recognised a woman straight away as Amy that she'd met in the ladies' toilets.
Yeah.
So Judy gave a description to the FBI of the women that she saw and of the men as well, and they drew up sketches of them. But by the time the FBI contacted the department store, no one remembered Amy or her captors, because remember, this is 9 months later. So that's it, basically. The Bradleys are still searching for Amy, and obviously they won't stop until she's found and brought home. So the last time Amy Bradley was seen before her disappearance was in Curacao in March 1998. She is 5'6" with brown hair and green eyes. She has 4 distinctive tattoos: a Tasmanian devil on her left shoulder, a sun on her lower back, a Chinese symbol on her right ankle, and a gecko around her navel. And she will now be 46 years old. Wow. And obviously I will put up photos on social media. And if anybody has seen this woman...
20 odd years ago now, isn't it?
1998, yeah.
But that's just crazy. It's just so why was she... What happened? Why could she go suddenly from sleeping on her balcony to then all of a sudden she's kidnapped? I mean, how does that even happen?
I don't know. Speculation, but she must have woken up, and maybe, as her dad said, maybe she has went up to the upper deck, for a smoke and a coffee, and she's bumped into the guy that she'd been dancing with the night before. I mean, he must have something to do with it. He was the last person to be seen with her.
Yeah, he was the sort of middleman. He
would be the one that maybe got her off the ship.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean,
But then I'm wondering, what would have happened if they hadn't let the passengers off the Like, would that have prevented it from happening? Or
well, yeah, because she must have still been on the ship when they docked, like, because they hadn't let the gangplank down.
Yeah.
So but when their family had been searching for her, then he could have had her in his room or something like that. Because obviously,
she could have been anywhere.
They were only searching the common areas.
I mean, you think of these big, massive ships. I mean, they're huge,
and all the rooms there's like 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So imagine all the rooms.
Yeah.
So he could just be keeping her in his room. I mean, this is us. This is our opinion. He might have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're just speculating.
But whoever has got her, and then as soon as that ship's put the gangplank down, he's nobody's going to be paying attention. There's all these 3,000 people getting off the ship. So he's,
Yeah, because that's the thing.
Or there's maybe more than one person
At this
involved.
point, nobody's even looking at who's getting off the ship, are they? Because
nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
And then, as I said, I mean, all I can assume is that she somehow managed to get away and ran towards the taxi to ask for a phone.
Yeah.
And then they've caught up with her and took her off. But it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Totally. That's annoying me now.
Oh, for God's sake.
I know, but I mean, especially if you know the sightings that you said that they've had in that. I mean,
it sounds like she's definitely still alive, yeah.
And she's still somewhere.
But it's like, as well, like, all these years, like, what 23 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time to have kept somebody. And I mean, I don't know. So with the last sighting of her was a good few years ago. I mean, like, we're assuming she's still alive now. But I mean, what happens? Is there going to be surely there's going to be a certain age that a woman's going to get to when
she's no longer required?
Yeah. So what do they do with her then? Do they let her go? Do they, do they kill her? Like, what do they do?
Yeah. I know, that's true.
So, I mean, I really hope that she's still alive and she's still out there and she manages to get home.
I know, because I just, shame for what kind of life she's obviously had to live the last 20 years. Then if that's if she's been made to be like an escort or sex worker or something, something sounds like sort of some kind of something to do with that anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of quite a bizarre one, isn't it? It's awful. That poor family.
I know. That must be awful.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to go on a cruise now.
No, that's definitely. I didn't want to go on one before, and that certainly put me off.
No.
And there's actually quite a lot of people. There's a lot more people than you would think go missing on cruises.
Well, it's easy to go over. I suppose it could say easy to go over, but I mean, it has happened, doesn't it? People...
There is actually another one I might tell you about. Another time there was a British girl. She was working on a Disney cruise.
Oh right. Oh.
So and she's disappeared. So I might tell you about that one at some point.
That could be another good episode to listen
to. So thank you for listening, everybody. If you would like to follow us on social media, we are on Instagram and Twitter
at crime_divers_pod.
We have a Facebook page,
Crime Divers Podcast.
You can email us at
crime_divers_pod@outlook.com.
We have a YouTube channel,
which is Crime Divers Podcast.
And if you would like to support the show on Patreon, we're patreon.com/crime divers. You can get early access to episodes. We release 2 Patreon only episodes a month, and you can interact with us. I don't know what else to say about the Patreon. Just you can our bloopers. Well, there's a few bloopers on there, not many, but
there's not loads.
Yeah. So, and if you like the show,
subscribe, rate, review.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.